Okay, so I apologize for Monday. Hopefully you all got a lot of work done on your houses. I was not doing any work. I was enjoying the wonderful comforts of my bathroom as I was laying on the floor, hoping to survive somehow. But I did not come here and spread it all to you, so hopefully none of you get it. But it was not fun. Anyway, I think this is the first time in 10 years that I've been out 3 days in a semester, so I sincerely apologize for that. But it is what it is. We're going to make it work. Today we're departing from the model that you've been working so diligently and hard on, and instead we're going to today work on a general introduction to lights and lighting and explaining how lights work in V-Ray. And so we're going to do kind of two parts to it. There is a scene that I've prepared for you that we're ultimately going to bring our lights into. So if you go to exercise 220, at the bottom of the page, there is, never mind, where is it? Sample night environment, right there. You can download this, and that will, it'll give you a very generic little piece of wall at night that you can install your lights on and test to see if they work. So we're going to get to that in just a second. I've gone ahead and I've downloaded it, and it's going to open up in Rhino. But when we start talking about lights and lighting in Rhino, there are really two components that make up any light that we're creating. The first one is the physical geometry of the light, so the thing that is the light fixture itself. And when we look up, like in this room, for example, not that the lights are particularly attractive in this room, but if you look up at the lights that are on in the back, we see something there. We see a frame, we see that kind of lens material, and through that we kind of see a general glow. Okay? So that fixture, that geometry, is something that we physically have to make. V-Ray also takes its own light that actually does the light casting part, that makes the light show up at night. And so we have to create two things that make this light possible. And so the first piece of it is that geometry. So I'm going to start with the geometry. This is the night scene that we're going to ultimately be doing the render on. I'll leave that open and open up a new Rhino. I'm going to do a new large object inches. And I'm going to start by creating the geometry of a light. And historically, I always do a can light. I'm really bored with a can light, so I'm going to do something different. I'll do like a rectangular light or something, just because I can't do another circular can light. So when we do this is actually a relatively simple process in terms of making it. We're just focused on the geometry itself. We don't need anything else in this particular scene. So maybe I'll start... we'll do a rectangular surface. We do corner to corner. I'll start at point 0, 0, for lack of a better point, and we'll make, we'll say this is at 18 inches, comma 18 inches, like that. And the other thing is, because this is ultimately going to be mounted on the ceiling, instead of having the light be going up, I'm going to model it from the underside as if I'm looking up at it. So I'm going to model it slightly differently than I otherwise would. I want to create some kind of profile that goes around this particular object. We can just use a box here. So let's say at -2 inches, comma, -20 inches. There it is. And we'll say -0.25 inches, so it's going down. Perfect. I'm going to copy this, and then I'll rotate it. Oops. Take both of those, we'll copy them. And we'll rotate them. Like that. And so essentially I'm creating the little frame that goes around the light. In an ideal world, we're not going to go into the ceiling at all. I know, technically speaking, recessed lights like this or can lights that you would have in your house or whatever go up into the ceiling. It's too much work to cut out geometry in Rhino, so we'll just do it really thin on the surface and pretend that there's more that happens behind it. So I'm actually going to move this light, the lens here down ever so slightly. Let me go to move vertical, and I'll move it down by maybe 1/8 of an inch, negative 0.125 inches. There we go. And as I start to look at this on the underside, it's like, okay, well, there's a basic light that I've established. I need to work through my layers. I need to assign my materials appropriately, and then we'll go from there. So let me go into layers. We will call this light, I don't know, square. I can't even type today. LCD, LED. We need, underneath that, we need two things. One, we need the trim. And second, we'll call this the bulb for lack of something better. I know this is a big sheet as opposed to an actual light bulb, but it will effectively do the same thing. So I'm going to put this sheet onto the bulb layer, and I'll put these frame pieces to the trim layer. And so now I have the square LED, I have the trim, and I have the bulb. I need to assign the materials so that they're appropriate. I'll go into my V-Ray materials. I need to load in some new materials. Let me go to load material. And I'll pick a trim material. I don't know. I'll do a metal. Sure, why not? Let's do a matte aluminum. Sure, sounds good. And I'll assign this material to the trim layer. There it is. So thus far, if I were to do a rendering, I'd have my aluminum material that is the frame of this, and I'd have a bulb surface, but I have no material on the bulb. And so we need a way to make that surface glow. And just like when we look up at those lights, we need a way of making it look like there's a light there. This is not the light that is going to cast the light and the shadows in the final V-Ray scene. It's just the material look of the light. So it's a different kind of light. It's going to be called something called an emissive material. I have a tutorial written up on how to do it. It's V-Ray 8.15. And so I'm going to actually pull that one up as a reference because there's a few numbers that I can't remember off the top of my head. So let me go into my tutorials. Let me go to V-Ray. And we'll scroll down here a bit to 8.15. There's the emissive material. And this is going to walk us through how to create this particular material. You could save it after you create it onto your flash drive so you can use it over and over, though creating it's pretty fast. So we're going to go, I'll leave this one. Let me just stick it over here for just a second. There we go. And now I'll go into my materials, and I'm going to create a new material. So I'll right-click on Scene Materials. I'll go to Create Material, and I'm going to create a standard material. And this standard material we will call bulb for lack of something better. Could be lens or bulb or something like that. And I'll go ahead and say OK. There it is. Next thing I need to do is I need to right-click on the bulb layer, and I'm going to go to Create Layer, Emissive. So we've done reflection and refraction before, but we haven't done emissive. And what emissive means is that this is a light-emitting material. So if you wanted to create any kind of neon or glow-in-the-dark or some material that was like that, that's where it comes from, this emissive. So I'm going to create the emissive layer, and you see that in the drawers I added a drawer for emissive. So right now I need to go through and I need to change some colors. So first off, in the regular diffuse, so right here, I need to set my color to white. So set it to white. And my transparency color to black, which it already is. Next thing I need to do is, to mimic the incandescent light, I'm going to do these following settings. The emissive color, right here, I need to set an RGB value of 200. You see why I pulled this up, so I can reference the numbers at the same time. 200, 161, and 82. There it is. It's a pretty ugly yellowy color. Yeah. This is the V-Ray 8.15 emissive material. I'll leave it so that the title's showing. There you go. Thanks. So I have that set up. There, that's my emissive color. That's the first one. I'll say, OK. My emissive transparency here, I'm going to change. Again, these are RGB values to 100, 100, 100. And I'll say, OK. Then I come down to the diffuse color, and it should be at 155, 155, and 150, if I can type, 55. And my transparency should be at 0, 0, 0, which it is. OK, so now I have those settings correct. And if I hit the preview button on bulb, it looks pretty ugly. OK? If I take this, however, and you can faintly see, you probably can't see it on the projector, but if you're working on your own computer, you can see just a little bit of glow on the tiles. But right here, this intensity value, I can increase that intensity value and get this to glow more. So if I went from 1 to 10, and I went and previewed, we'd see that it's almost like the light bulb turned on. And you could see a lot more shine coming out of it. So that's good. We're going to bump this one all the way up to 100. And so on the screen, it's going to look almost white. And that's OK. That's the way we want it. So I have it set up at 100. That's now my bulb. I need to apply the bulb layer to my, apply the bulb material to my bulb layer. There it is. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that and make this one big again. There we go. And so now I should have the trim and I should have the bulb. And I could get far more inventive in the geometry of this light fixture, but I'm starting with something rather basic. The one other thing that would help is if instead of dropping this in on a corner, it might help to know where the exact center of this object is. So I will move this whole thing to 0, 0, 0 right at the center there. So that'll help me align it a little bit later on. So I've created that. It's ready to go. I haven't worried about rendering it in this view, because if I were to render it right now, it's on a black background. Nothing's really showing. It's not helping. And that bulb should have... Well, we'll double check it when we do the final rendering, but the bulb didn't show, and it should have shown, which is concerning. But we'll double check it in a second. I'll go ahead and save this. I'll go to File and then Save. And I have a folder where I put all of my lights. So in my resources, I have a folder for Rhino. I have a folder for Rhino blocks. And I have a folder for lighting. And so this is a square LED 18. And I'll go ahead and click Save. There we go. And now I'm going to go over to my sample night scene. So this is the one that I downloaded from the course website under today's exercise. The advantage here is I've preset everything up for you. It already has a night scene set up. If we were to render this right now with no lights in it at all, well, you wouldn't see much. But I can see a little bit of a shadow from the moon, and I can see a little bit of a mottled sky. You guys can barely see it there. A little bit. It's a little piece of wall. So now we can go ahead and bring in that light fixture. So if I go to my Edit menu, I go to Blocks, and I go to Insert Block Instance. And I'm going to go find that one that I just saved. Sorry, it's not in V-Ray, it's in Rhino. I want this to come in as a link and as a reference. I'll say OK. And I stuck it right there on the corner, but ultimately I'm going to want to move it to the center. It would have helped if I gave myself a diagonal line across here to snap to. There we go, like that. So I brought that in. It brought the materials in with it. So I have my bulb, and I have my, let me purge the unused materials. What? Shouldn't have gotten rid of those. Let me make a quick change to that block and see if I can update it and bring those materials back in. Let's update that. There you go. Sorry. Didn't mean to get rid of my materials. So they're there. Now if I were to go back to my render 1, let me go to set view, render 1. There we go. And hit the render button. Wow. That's so nice. They gave me exactly what I wasn't supposed to get. Yay. You gotta love it when stuff doesn't work for me, right? Let me see if this fixes it. I'll tell you what I did if it worked. See, I'm human too. There we go. So I'll show you what I did. Because my surface, I created a flat surface, and I was rendering the underside of it instead of the top side of it. The material, the emissive material, is a one-sided material because I didn't check the box to make it a double-sided material. So the back side was black, and the top side was glowing. So I had the wrong direction. Anyway, this is what I get. I get a rendering that shows the square that I created. The emissive material is glowing, so it's as if we're looking up at the lights in my scene, but it's not really casting any shadows, right? So herein lies the two parts to a light system in V-Ray and Rhino. First part is we need the geometry, and we need to have the emissive light. The second part is we need a V-Ray light that actually does cast the light. So now it's time to go back, and right here I'm going to create the V-Ray light. And it's really important that you understand that the V-Ray light has to be in the scene that's doing the rendering. So all the lights that we're going to insert into our final renderings are going to be in that master site file, just like the sun. You don't put the sun in the block that you're bringing in. You put the sun in the final rendered version. So I'm going to put the V-Ray light in the final rendered version as well. So to do this, the simplest light that's going to act the same way as this is a spotlight. And so I'm going to look at my V-Ray toolbars, and I'm going to come over here, and there's an option for Create Spotlight. And before I actually create the spotlight, I think it's always useful to have a layer for your lighting. And underneath that, I'll have a layer for my spotlights. And it's nice to do this because then you can go back and select all the spotlights together and change their settings. If you don't like how strong they are or how weak they are, you can go back and make those adjustments. So with that spotlight layer selected, I'm going to go back and create a spotlight. So I'll come over here to my tools. I'll click on Create Spotlight. And I'm going to snap right to that center. The first thing here is I need to type in a radius and a diameter. And I'm going to show you shortly how this changes and affects the lights that we're going to create. The general rule of thumb, the safe thing to do, is to make your radius equal to your height, or to make your diameter twice the height. It's the same thing. It just depends on whether you're working in radius or diameter. So in my case, my radius I'm going to set to 1 foot. And my end of cone, or my height, I'm also going to set to 1 foot. But I don't want it going to the side. I want it going straight up and down. So instead of being in the render view, I'm going to look in one of the side views, and I'm going to type 1 foot. So there it is. So my radius is 1 foot. My height is 1 foot. It's a good rule of thumb. This cone then represents the light that is going to cast shadows and stuff in V-Ray. When I create this light, however, I have to make sure that the whole light is not contained within any other objects. So right now, this point here is contained inside the wall above, so it's not going to shine on anything. So I need to move it down such that the whole light is below my light. You have to be really careful. Don't accidentally do this, where that tip is just barely inside your geometry. Make sure it's actually out. So move it down just a little bit. There it is. So we've got a little bit of a gap there. If I move back to render 1, if I go to set view, we'll go to render 1, I'm looking at my light fixture that I brought in as a block, and my V-Ray light, which is a spotlight shining down. If I were to render right now, the settings on the light aren't correct, and it would end up being really bright. Sorry, wrong window. Too much power. So we need to go in and make some adjustments to this light as well. So I have the spotlight selected. I'm going to go over to my properties, and I'm going to change a few things. We come all the way over to the light properties. This is like the sun, where you click on the light properties. And with the light properties selected, first thing I'm going to do is change my color. So I'll click on my color, and it's going to be 255, 214, and 170. 170. Puts a little bit more yellow into the light. It's written on your sheet, by the way. 255, 214, and 170. And I'll say OK. I'm going to change my units. Again, under the Intensity tab, I'm going to change my units not to be in scalar anymore, but to be in radiant power, or capital W, which is watts. For whatever reason, we think of watts in terms of light bulbs. So you have a 60-watt light bulb. You know about how much power or how much light comes from a 60-watt light bulb, even though now we have LEDs and their equivalents, but you get the idea. So now, with that set in watts, or radiant power, we can specify an intensity that would be in watts. So I could say, you know what, I want this to be 40 watts of light. And maybe I end up wanting it more. As I come down here, my decay, instead of being linear, I want it to be set for inverse square. And my penumbra fall off, that can be left as linear. The rest of these options are all fine. With all of those set up correctly, I can go back and I can re-render. So I'll click the render button again. And if I did it correctly, we should get a nice arc on the wall. For you guys in the projector, you're not seeing it quite as well as I would like. I'm going to increase that intensity. We'll go up to maybe, let's go to 75 and see if it shows a little better for you. There we go. So this spotlight, when it shines down, creates a circular pattern on the wall. So if I were to move this light closer to the wall, this circular pattern would get higher up the wall. So if, for example, I took these two things and I moved them closer to the wall, and I did a render, the intensity would end up being greater, and this would get closer to the wall. the cone gets a little sharper. Now, if I wanted this light to be more diffuse, and given the size of this light, it probably would be, I need to change the geometry of this light that I created. So instead of being the typical relation, the one-to-one radius to height, I'm going to change it maybe to 1 to 4 or something like that. So I'll create a new light. And my diameter this time, I'll say, is 2 feet. Or excuse me, my radius is 2 feet. And my height, I'll keep at 1 foot. There it is. Once again, I'm going to move this down. So it's outside, outside of all geometry. Color, 255, 214, and 170. Units are going to be in watts. My decay is inverse square. And now that I have that set right, I'll come back over and I'll do the rendering again. And so now, even though this is a lot closer to the wall, you can see that the arc is much broader. So we can control a lot of how this light looks and responds based on the shape of the cone that's casting the light. The broader it is, the wider and more diffuse it is. The opposite, however, would be a really narrow light. So I'll leave this one shining, but I'll create another one out here that's a little bit sharper. So let's do it at I'll do it at 6 inches and 1 foot. So we're going in the opposite direction. And move it down again. All right, so there it is. There's no geometry that's holding it. But this one, once I create the rest of this, 255, 214, and 170. Watts, inverse square. I know there's nothing holding it, so you don't see, this is why that other piece is important. But the spotlight is so narrow it comes down and makes a spot on the floor, a circle on the floor. So it's not casting anything on the walls, it's coming straight down. So the narrower you make that cone, the more direct the light will be, more like a flashlight beam, versus being more wide and diffuse. So that's one style of light fixture. So we recess something. It would work in the inverse if I wanted, if I wanted to do the Michael Jackson floor tiles when he's walking. What's that music video? Is Michael Jackson like way too old? Am I dating myself? Probably. Yeah. Probably. Yeah, I know. You guys are all polite. You're like, anyway. I think it's Billie Jean when he walks on the floor with the tiles that light up. Anyway. Yeah, I'm probably dating myself. Yeah. I could take this and I could drop this on the floor. Here I am thinking I'm making a great pop culture reference, and I'm not. Yep. Yep. It was great for somebody who lived in the 80s. I know. So I could do the inverse. If I wanted this to be, a floor tile, for example, I can set this up as a floor tile, and I could render it the opposite direction. Yeah. Thank you guys for at least looking it up for me. I appreciate it. So I could make this, the floor tile that lights up. So you guys get how this can start to be kind of creative. I also don't have to be limited to the fact that this light is at that color. This is typical light color. This is what we use. This is our standard light color. But if I took this cone light and I said, you know what, I'd really rather have this light be like a stage light and drop it over into a red tone, for example, I could come back.
You just copy it, right? And flip it.
And I could make that light essentially any color that I wanted. Well, you guys can't really see it, but it's more pink. right? I can make it green. I haven't changed the emissive material color. I would have to change that too to match. So I'll come back and we'll do a floor tile scene. Sometimes I go off on tangents like this on this lecture. Anyway, so there's an example of doing an uplight instead. But what about if I wanted to create like a lamp or something like that as part of my lights, or a wall sconce? So those are a little bit more different. So I'm going to go in and create the geometry first. So let me go ahead and create a new large object, inches. And once again, I'm going to work on this and create whatever my new light would be. I'll do a wall sconce. Why not? But I'll create it with a shade because a lot of times people want to see it done with a shade. So I'll say at, I don't know, let's do 0.5 inches, comma, 6 inches. And we'll do this at maybe 10 inches. And we'll do this at so you always have to start by creating this geometry. So we'll snap that there. Let's move this vertical by an inch. And we'll do diameter of 4 inches. Okay, so I'm just creating basic wall sconce. Okay, I'm going to eliminate the tops and bottoms so that it's hollow there. And we're going to assume for the moment that my light is going to be held somewhere inside here. I could get creative and put a little bit more of a at 0.5 comma negative. Oops, wrong way. And put something that extends up just a bit inside here. I'm not going to go all out and actually model the light bulb itself. I'm not going to do anything too fancy. I just need something that's going to generically hold my lights. So there it is. And let me create all of my layers associated with this. So this would be my wall sconce. And we need a layer for the shade. There's my shade. And we need a layer for the, we'll call it the arm, which would be this. And we need a layer for, that's just too tall. That feels better. I don't know, what should we call this? The back plate? Or face plate or something like that. I don't know. Okay, so I have the arm and the back plate and the shade. They're all going to be on the wall sconce layer. This needs to be on the back plate layer. Object layer. Perfect. So now I have those separated out onto their layers. And I have to do a couple things. One, I have to start assigning materials. In this particular case, I'm not going to worry so much about the emissive material because the light bulb source, the bulb itself, is hidden inside this shade. So I'm not going to overly worry about that. But I do need to create a couple things. First off, I need the material for my base, my back plate, and my arm. So I'll go into my materials. And we need to load some materials. And let's do it. I don't know, somehow this looks like a bathroom fixture, so let's do it out of Chrome. And so I'll assign this material to layer. My right click really isn't working today. Apply material to layer. I'll do it to the arm. Right click, apply material to layer, and I'll do it to my back plate, and I'll say OK. So the next piece, though, is the shade. And this one's always a bit tricky, is finding what the right happy medium is for the shade. And there's no scripted way of doing this. You kind of have to do some renderings to find out, but we have to bring it into a scene and test it out. I used to do this using a two-sided material, which you can do, but it's a little bit more work than just kind of faking it. And so instead of making it like a real shade, we're just going to kind of fake it and make a pretend material that wouldn't exist in real life. So I'm going to right-click on Scene Materials, and I'll go to Create Material, and I'll do Standard. And I'm going to call this material Shade. And this works, by the way, if you want to do frosted glass. Sometimes this is a good strategy for frosted glass because using the actual frosted glass just takes too much rendering power to make it turn out. So in the shade layer, essentially what I'm going to do is instead of being solid gray, I'm going to change the color to be the color that I kind of want the shade to be. And so if you wanted it to be more on the tan side, you might pick something like this that's kind of a tannish khaki color. Maybe you want it to be more of a light, like a lens, in which case maybe it's a little bit more yellow, but maybe you turn this down to be a little bit more gray, maybe it's a little bit more white, maybe it's somewhere in that ballpark. I don't know. You have to kind of play around with it. So I went with that. I'll say OK. Then I'm going to adjust my transparency. If I were to preview it, it looks like that. I'll adjust my transparency value to dark gray. So it has just a little bit of transparency to it. That might be too much. So it's just a little bit. And I'll go ahead and apply that to my shade layer. And we'll say OK. This shade, by the way, is only one thickness. So I don't have two sides to it, just one side. So there it is. There's my backplate, etc. I'll go to File, and then, whoop, let me get rid of Layer 7. And I'll go to File, and then Save As. And this one is Wall, Sconce, and I'll say Save. Now I need to bring it into that scene. So here it is into my scene. And I'll go to my Edit, Blocks, Insert Block Instance. And I'm going to go find that wall sconce and say Open. There it is. I'll say OK. I'm going to link it as a reference. I'll say OK. And I didn't plan ahead, so I'm just going to snap it to the edge of my wall, and then I have to do some rotations here. So let's rotate this like that. Let's move it. Let's move it vertically. And let's move it over here into the center. Now, in this particular case, as I was looking at this, I could use the spotlights that I've been using where, like this one, for example, where I was coming up from inside, shining on the wall, and shining down. But I wouldn't get any light coming out through the lens. And in reality, this kind of a light has light coming out, going up, and going down. So we're going to use a different kind of light for this, and it's called a point light. It's the third button over. It says Create Point Light. Again, before you actually create the point light, I encourage you on the lighting layer to create a new sublayer for point lights. It'll just help you stay a little bit organized. So I'll make that active, double click, there it is. And I will come over to the point light layer, or the point light button. I'll click on it, and it says point light location. So I'm going to do it. Let me turn on my center snap so I can snap to the center of this light. There it is. But I want it also to be moved vertically down inside the light. So I'll select it again. Point lights are very difficult to select. They're a weird size that you oftentimes select other objects when you're creating them. Yeah. Nope, it's fixed. So, and even when you zoom in, it stays. So it doesn't grow. It's always that size, no matter where you are. So it's a little bit difficult to deal with. So anyway, I have it selected. I'm going to move it down. So I'll go to Move, and then V for vertical. And I'm going to move from there. I'm going to go down so that it's in the center of my light. That might have been a little bit low, but it's close enough. So there it is inside. Once again, I'll go to Properties, I'll go to Light, and then I'll work through my properties. Now, it didn't happen to me. I didn't talk about it yet because I was hoping it would happen on this round, but it doesn't always happen when I'm doing lecture. Okay, so V-Ray has a really annoying little caveat that happens. And that is that just like when you go to the store and, yeah, I know, you're like, just one? Really? No, this is a bad one though. You go to the store and you buy a package of light bulbs, and you come home from the store and you screw that first light bulb in, and guess what? It's burned out. That happens. Well, guess what? V-Ray wanted to make your lives just like real life. And so every once in a while you create a light and it's dead. It happens. The solution? Delete it and create a new one. So I don't know, but it happens. So when you come over to your light settings, as you scan down these numbers, if you're not seeing numbers here, if you're seeing all zeros in all of these values, that means your light bulb's dead. And even if you wrote down what the values were and you typed them in, it's dead. It's toast. So it's just like you can't surgically resurrect that light bulb that you bought at the store. It's just dead. Toss it. Okay? So I just like to warn you all ahead of time that it will happen. Today it will happen to at least 2 of you while you're doing it. Probably a good average. I could definitely say 1, probably 2 of you. And the rest of you will be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then next time you'll come in, it'll happen to you. It just happens. Right, Carla? It just happens. Yeah. And you didn't do anything wrong. It just happens. So I need to go in and adjust my settings again. So we'll start with my color. 255, 214, and 170. I'll say OK. My units will go to radiant power, and we'll start this one out at 60. And my decay is already set for inverse square. So all of that's good. So now that all of those are set, I'm going to go back to my render 2 view. No, excuse me, my render 1 view. And it's ready to render. So I have my light, I have my fixture in place. We'll go ahead and start a render. Let me open that one up. And maybe I need to turn off the other lights so that you can see this one a little bit more carefully. Right? But I'm seeing right here, let me zoom in a little bit, there's my back plate, there's my arm, and there's my light glowing through that material that I created. Now maybe that's a little bit too much or too strong on the wattage. If I tone that light down, instead of being 60, if I went to maybe 30 and then did a render, you might be able to see it better. So as tempting as it is to jump to the, oh, I'll just load the frosted glass, it's a lot easier to make a material that's close to what you want. This looks a lot like, when it renders out, it looks a lot like what a frosted glass would look like, but you're saving a lot on the render power to create it. Okay? So there's an example with a little shade. You could change the color. Again, my backplate is in chrome. That's why you see the reflection of the light. By using the point light, I'm getting diffuse light coming out to the sides, but I'm also getting the 2 arcs on the wall. The other thing that you'll notice is when you go home tonight and you're brushing your teeth in your bathroom and you're looking at the lights, you'll start noticing all the little shadows on the walls because now you're doing these kinds of renderings. You'll notice when you turn the can lights on in your hallway that it makes those shadows. So you start paying attention to those kinds of things. So those are the 2 lights that I want you to work with. I'm going to show you one more just for the fun of it because everybody loves neon, so I'm going to show you how to do neon just because why not. But there are more lights that are in V-Ray than we're talking about right now. And I will get to the other types of lights. There's a rectangular light, for example, which is useful in some cases. the settings aren't quite as scriptive for the other types of lights. So when I start doing rectangular lights, I will talk about how you figure out how much the wattage should be. It's more of a guess and check sort of thing because it's dependent on the size of the light. But in the case of today, I want you to experiment by creating something that can hold a spotlight, like a can light or some kind of a point source light. I also want you to create some kind of a light, maybe with a shade that has a point light in it. So floor lamp, wall sconce, etc. If you want, or maybe I should encourage you to, think about where it would work nicely in your final assignment 205 to have some light fixtures and create light fixtures that would be useful for your assignment 105. Okay? Or 205, sorry.
So when you do the spotlight, a point light, you didn't do the emissive material.
No, I didn't do the emissive material on this wall sconce because this point light that was inside this was going to shine through it. And that was going to create the glow because I had a shade. If I didn't have a shade, if I had like a bare light bulb in the room, that would actually be a good one to try to model. If I had a bare light bulb in the room, you would have the point light shining around everything, but then you'd also have to model the bulb itself, the emissive material of the bulb. So it's a little bit more complicated. The what?
Emissive material, what's it in fact? Make it softer?
The emissive material is a glowing material. It's supposed to glow. But it is not supposed to light the scene. So when I created this floor tile or this roof tile, without the spotlight on it, it wouldn't have enough light for the scene. So it'll glow, it'll show that it's glowing, but it won't give enough light to render anything else in the scene. Everything else appears dark. So I still need the spotlight in combination with it. So it's two parts, yeah.
So the actual cylinder on the sconce is not emissive?
No, the cylinder on the sconce that I just created, this cylinder here is not emissive.
Okay.
What it is, let me flip over to that piece again. So this here is what we're talking about. The material, I created a shade, and I gave this, it's a simple material, I gave it a color and a transparency of dark gray. Nothing more. And because it's going to have a point light inside it, the light shining through it will create the cylinder, the emissive effect. So it's not an actual light bulb. I didn't create a light bulb there. I just shined through that.
It's shining through because the transparency is not black.
Is not black. Right. It is semi-transparent. So it's shining through.
It's actual like opacity.
Exactly. So if I change this material, for example, to black.
Does it also have an effect on the light, like that point light, if that transparency color was like green or something?
Yes.
Green.
Yep. Yep. So let me change this dark gray. I'll do it in two passes. The first one here, we'll change it to be, I'm picking bright colors to try to make it obvious. Okay, so I changed the material to red. If I go to File and then Save, sorry, wrong thing. For whatever reason, my block manager is really slow loading today. There we go. Wall sconce update. And now when I go back to render this again, I don't know whether you're going to be able to see it as much as I can. It is tinting the light a little bit more pink. There it is. So I changed the color of the shade. And I don't know whether you guys can see. Yeah, you can't see it as much as I can. The light that's shining on the wall is actually red or pinkish in my view. So if I wanted this to show up as more red light, I could also change the color of the light itself to be more red. So if I changed the color of the transparency, if it was solid, so if I went back to here and I went to my materials and I changed the shade here to be black so that this became solid, no light would come out the sides at all. It would just come out the top and the bottom, and I wouldn't get nearly the red glow because it's not passing through the transparent red.
So the transparency is only
black is solid, white is completely transparent. And I've found in practice that dark gray is about the sweet spot for these kinds of semi-transparent light type objects. And it's a lot simpler than some of the other methods. If you do a Google search online, there's other people that talk about, and I used to talk about doing a two-sided material. And it works if you want like a fabric print, and it's just more complicated. This is a much simpler way of getting a light shade to actually look the way you want it to look. Okay, so neon. Last one. We can't resist, right? So let me save this. Large object, inches. There we go. First thing I need is the neon itself. So we have to create that geometry first. I'll start by using some text. And what should it say? I'm not going to do like Bud Light or something. I can't do that. It's cool. Sorry. I'll say hi. Okay, so I create hi like that. I know, how nice, right? I'm going to go ahead and explode this. And when I explode it, I get the curves that go around it. I could change the font and that sort of thing if I wanted to. And actually, it would probably be better to be a little bit more scripted. Let's try that. Hold on. Why is it not letting me? There it is. Oh, God, I don't know PC fonts. What's like a scripty font? No, I'm not using Comic Sans. That one looks like it would be. No. Century Gothic. No, that's too blocky. I know my fonts on my computer, I know them all. So, script. Oh, thanks. That's really nice. What? Will it do it that way? No, it won't. Oh, okay, that works. Okay, so then I'll go to explode, and I get the outlines for it. I know it's a little awful, but just bear with me, okay? Thanks so much. Fine. No, I don't want you to have to sit here and watch me go through it more. All right, so what I need now is I need a cross-sectional curve. So I'll go to this is essentially I'm creating the tube. Okay, so I'll go to one of these points, we'll start there, and I need to create the neon tube, whatever it is. So this would be the width of the tube. So maybe it's like that. I'm going to rotate 3D so that it's standing up on edge. And then I'm going to sweep across this curve. I may end up having to do this in a few passes to see how it works. I don't know yet. So let's do a sweep one. There's my rail. Let's see. Nope, doesn't like me much, does it? I should have stuck with a plain one. Fine, all right. So this is what happens when you do stuff live. It doesn't always work. Yeah, when in doubt, go back to Arial, right? All right. There we go. It wouldn't hurt for me to round these corners off a little bit since they're a little on the square side. So let me do a fillet on them. We'll do, let me size this. It might be off in size too. Let me scale it. And we'll say that should be about, there we go. So I'm going to do fillet with a radius of, let's do 0.5. All right, now I need that cross-sectional curve. That's too small. Rotate 3D. There we go. Now I'm going to sweep that around my rail. So sweep 1. There's my rail. There's my cross-sectional curve. There it builds my neon. How nice. Same thing, we'll take the curve, copy it over to the other pieces. Sweep 1, rail, cross-section, good. Sweep 1, rail, cross-section, and there we are. So now in this case, my sign, I need to stand it up, so we'll do one more rotate 3D. From 0, 0, we'll stand it up like not that way, like that. And now on this, really all I need is an emissive material. So I don't have any other materials that are working with this. So I'll take this material, or this object, and I'll create an emissive material. So I'll go to create material. This is going to be standard. We're going to call this neon. I'll say OK. Then we'll right click on neon and we'll go to create layer emissive. So this is that glowing part. And now we need to change some of the settings. So under color, we'll change to be like a red. And then we can go back and we can reference the rest of the settings that I said here. So the transparency is at 100. So we'll do 100, 100, and 100. And then this was 155s. And the other one was black. Now if we look at this and we click on preview, it's not going to look like much. But if we increase the intensity, I'm only going up to maybe, well, no, we'll go to 100. And see how it looks. There it is. Because the color is so intense, it's not turning white. So we can actually bump this intensity up even higher before it turns white. So I could go to maybe 250, for example, and it's not changing much because it's not as close to white in its initial color. So I'll leave that at 100. And then we're going to right-click on neon and say apply material to layer. We'll put on the default layer. And I'll call the default layer neon. And we'll get rid of the rest of these pieces. Yeah. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. It's just like that first class where we were playing around with it. I was just, basically you could take any logo that if you wanted to make a neon version of a particular logo that you wanted, you could take that logo and trace it over, do a sweep of it, and thereby create the neon, and then you could create it. I was just picking text because it was a fast way of doing it, and my script text was too ugly, so we had to change that. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'll go to File, Save As, and we'll call this neon sign. And I'll click Save. And now it's time to change over and bring it into here. So we'll go to my blocks, insert block instance, and we'll find that neon sign. And we're going to go to link and reference. I'll go ahead and say OK. And we can drop it in. It shouldn't be right on the wall. It should probably stick out just a little bit. So let me move it this way by just a little bit. And let's put it on the other side of this light fixture. Let's put it right there. And let's bring it up a little bit. All right, so there it is. We'll go into Render 1. And so I'll go to Set View, and I'll go to Render 1. And we'll go ahead and render it and give it a shot. So this time, I didn't actually set up a light for the scene. or a light for that. Come on, there it is. I didn't set up a light for the neon. I just used the emissive material because there's enough other light in the scene to still show it like a neon light would be. If I wanted more light coming from that piece of neon, this is probably a good place where a rectangular light would work to provide more of that red light that I want. But given the rest of the light in the scene, I'm not overly worried about it. It still glows. It's still showing like neon, which I think does the effect of what you want. You could use this same strategy to create tube lights of any kind if you wanted to. The other thing that you could do is we could increase the intensity of this neon light up a bit more. So I could go back into my materials, and I'm doing it here as a shortcut right now. But under intensity here, I could say maybe at 300, and we could try a render again. And this may give us even a little bit more glow from the red. I can see it starting to show up on the floor a little bit more. The sacrifice here, if I'm doing the light this way instead of using a rectangular light, is it'll be a little splotchier in its look long term. So there we are. If you look over here, you can see that when this starts to get too dark, it's hard to distinguish it from the edge, where it's much easier to see it here because of the other light in the room. So that's where we're using the other light to showcase this. If I were to turn off the rest of the lights, it would be much harder to see this and have it glow as nicely. Okay, so your job today is to create 2 to 4 light fixtures using point lights and spotlights. Those are the lights that we're working with primarily today. We will cover rectangular lights a little bit later on in class. Next class, when you come back on Monday, we're going to be putting these lights or similar lights into your building and doing an interior day rendering. So it still won't be nighttime yet, but we're going to do an interior day rendering. So you guys all had extra time the last class to get further along with your model. Hopefully you used that time very wisely. Because we're getting to the point where you need to start having those things kind of figured out because we're starting to do the real renderings. We'll do, next Monday will be the interior day rendering. Next Wednesday will be the interior night rendering. And then the following Monday, right? Yeah. We'll do an exterior night too. Yeah. So we'll do all 4 views. I have to double check the calendar on exactly what days are what days. But that's where we're going. Essentially, the next several lectures are going to be day and night. Any questions before I turn you loose? No? All right. Lighting's fun. You guys should have fun with this. It's the best part of working with V-Ray.